Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this brief discussion of some of the features of Spring Integration 4. I only have a couple of slides. We also have Artem Bilan online too, and he'll be helping me with answering any questions that come up in the chat window. As many of you know, I'm sure Artem made some significant contributions to the 4.0 release and of course the 3.0 release. Just the picture there of Spring I/O, and as you can see, Spring Integration is a major component of the Spring I/O platform. And we're going to be demonstrating the use of a Spring Boot application that's integrated with, or using Spring Integration from within a Spring Boot application here today. A few URLs. Obviously, the integration project page. Refer to the what's new in Spring Integration 4, and a bunch of links there. These slides will be available after the event. Now, the last link on the left, the demo app, the application that I'm going to be building while we're talking here today, will be available in the samples repo either later today or certainly by end of day tomorrow. So with that, let's get started. First thing I really wanted to point out is I didn't put anything, like what's new or anything like that on the slides, because we have it's covered in some detail in the reference manual. The link was on that last slide. But as you can see, many of the enhancements were in the area of annotations. So one of the goals with Spring Integration 4 is to enable you to develop Spring Integration applications without defining the flows in XML. Personally, I have no issues with XML, but we do get more and more requests for, how do I wire up component X as an @bean definition, or without using XML at all. And it's always been possible to do that. It's just that it's non-trivial in some cases. There are some adapters and such are relatively simple to define as a bean. Others are quite complex, and you can be creating 3, 4, or more beans to create an endpoint. The other thing I wanted to address very quickly is, why did we go to another major release so soon after 3.0? We don't typically do major releases this close together, but we felt it was important at this point because, as I'm sure you're aware, or maybe not aware, but many of the core abstractions from Spring Integration, message handler, a message channel, etc., were moved into the core Spring framework in Spring Framework 4.0, so that the new Spring messaging module now owns those classes, and of course there have been package changes. So we felt it was a big enough breaking change that Spring Integration 4 now uses those same core abstractions that the Spring messaging module uses for WebSockets and Stomp and stuff. So now we can completely interchange messages between that environment and Spring Integration without doing any mapping or conversion. So that's why we have a new major release, because clearly if you've written code and you have accessed or referenced those abstractions directly, then you will need to make some changes to your code. Of course, we generally recommend coding using POJOs, but we do realize that from time to time people do drop down to use the messaging APIs. So with that said, I think we'll just go straight into the demonstration, and what we're going to do is basically build a Spring Integration application using pure Java. And we'll touch on some of the changes. The code that I start with is actually possible to do with Spring Integration 3 and earlier, but as you'll see as we go through the hour, we'll pick up some of the major changes in Spring Integration 4. As I mentioned in the outset, we're going to be using a Spring Boot application, and there's a new Spring start. Let's see, I guess it's in my history here. Yeah, the Spring initializer, or start.spring.io, basically gives you a mechanism to build a sort of a bootstrap Spring Boot app. So it gives you, builds the POM and dependencies and such. And we have that fully integrated with the Spring tool suite. And I've already done it here, but essentially all we do is you can do a new Spring starter project, and when there's a message box that comes up with that, and we can basically select, well, what are we going to use? And so for this particular demonstration, I selected integration and web, so that it actually pulls in the Spring Boot starter dependencies for that. So I'm not going to go through it again. I already have it here. The only changes I've made, I did make some changes to the POM. I updated the Spring Boot version to M1, the 1.1 M1, which additional support was added for Spring support in the boot for Spring integration in Boot 1.1. I also added you can see here those starters. We got the Spring integration starter is pulled in, and the web starter. One of the benefits of using Spring Boot is that now the HTTP adapters just work out of the box. You don't have to go, build a war and deploy it on Tomcat, because Spring Boot comes with an embedded web server, and it's fully integrated with Spring integration. The Spring integration starter comes with a number of just basic core modules, like the core, Spring integration core, Spring integration file, IP, and a couple of others. So in this particular demo, towards the end, we're going to be doing some work with Twitter. So I added the Spring integration Twitter dependency, and we'll also be looking at Artem's done some amazing work in the Spring integration Java DSL, which is currently at a milestone. It's not integrated. It's not part of the Spring integration release. It will be in the future, probably 4.1. But as of now, it's still a work in process, and it's at milestone 1, and hopefully you'll see some of the benefits of it. And we're really looking for feedback on the DSL to make it into a first-class product for you guys to use. So that's really all I did. I created the starter project and added a couple of dependencies to the POM. Spring Boot app is simply, it creates an application context via this Spring application run method, and we just give it a reference back to this class. Spring Boot, for those who are not aware, this auto configuration, it will do things like if RabbitMQ is on the class path, it'll create a default connection factory and a default Rabbit template and stuff like that. So there are many things that occur because of that. And with Spring integration, it actually enables the core messaging beans that any Spring integration app requires. Things like the default task executor, creates the default error channel, and stuff like that. If you're not using Spring Boot and you want to use Spring integration just standalone, we can just use the enable integration annotation. So that will do the same thing. It will create those core framework beans that will be required by the runtime. So task schedulers for the pollers, etc. But of course, we are using Spring Boot, so we're going to leave it with enable auto configuration. And that implies if Spring integration is on the class path and you have enable auto configuration, then Spring integration will be enabled, and those beans will be created. So as I said, we do get from time to time questions come up on forum and Stack Overflow. How do we define an integration component using Java configuration? Now, the simplest of all endpoints from a configuration perspective is a message-driven inbound adapter. For the purposes of today, I'm just going to create a TCP inbound gateway, which is actually going to require a server connection factory. I'm just going to call it connection factory, and I'm just going to return a new TCP net. So I'm just going to listen on port 9876. Okay, so that's just, we're just declaring a bean for the connection factory. Now, as I said, inbound adapters that are message driven, that are not polled, are relatively simple to create. And so in this case, it's really just a TCP inbound gateway. And this is all currently available, or was available even with Spring Integration 3, and even Spring Integration, the two versions of Spring Integration. So let me just create this gateway. Because it's a simple component, it really is not that hard. We just define the bean. I'm going to create the gateway. We need to give it reference to the connection factory. Which is our CF bean. Now we need to give it an output channel, or request channel for gateways. Gateways have request and reply channels, so I'm going to set the request channel. And I'm just going to create a bean for request channel, and then of course we'll return the gateway. Let's create the channel. And we just return a simple direct channel. Okay, so there we have our simple inbound gateway that's connected to the request channel. Now we want a bean, or we want to. I'm just going to, for the purposes of this demonstration, we're just going to return a simple service activator that's going to invoke an echo service. Now, this again isn't new in 4.0. We've had this annotation for some time. We can just define a message endpoint, and I'm going to we have to, but previously to 4.0, and you'll see in a minute where we don't have to do this in future. But for existing applications, or for 3.0 and before, we'd have to create a class. I'm just going to call it echo, and we'll have a service activator, a method with an input channel equal to our request channel, and I'm just going to have a simple POJO public string echo. Now the TCP inbound channel adapter creates a byte payload by default, so I'm just going to do that. And all I'm going to do is just echo it. I'm going to return a string echo plus a new string for n. Now, because the service activator has no output channel, the reply will go back to the gateway. For those of you familiar with Spring Integration, that's one of the core capabilities. So we basically have our three beans. We have the TCP inbound adapter, or inbound gateway, the request channel, and then we have a message endpoint class, which is a POJO, and we have this POJO service called echo. The POJO requires component scan, so that this is standard Spring Framework component scan, and it will find this message endpoint, and we'll end up with the service activator. So let's run it. Make sure I don't have any old processes running here. No. So let's run this class. This is, as I said, Spring Boot application. And we can go to a terminal page, and I'm just going to telnet. This is a TCP adapter, so I'm going to telnet localhost 9876, which is the port we're listening on. I send foo, and I get back echo foo. So there we go, Spring Integration 101 with Java config. No, nothing I've shown you so far is special for Spring Integration 4. That's been there forever. So like I said, we've always had the capability of doing it. It's just, in this particular case, it's relatively simple, but we get into some of the more complex environments. It can get difficult. So the next thing I'm going to do is say, well, actually, I want to have a second entry point into this application. So I'm going to, and this really shows off the power of boot and the embedded HTTP adapter. So I'm going to create an HTTP inbound gateway that basically invokes the same service. HTTP gate. Let's create the gateway. In this case, we have a Boolean in here, so whether we're actually going to send a reply or not, which of course we are. Now, since Spring Integration 3, the HTTP inbound gateway and adapter use the Spring MVC request mapping feature. So we create a request mapping object. First thing I'm going to do is to say that what type of methods are we going to support. In this case, I'm just going to support HTTP method post. And we need to give it a path. So I'm going to give it a path pattern, and I'm just going to have it listen on the foo path. Let's inject that into the gateway. Gateway dot set request mapping. And of course, where do we send the HTTP request when it comes in? We want to send it to that same read. So the set request channel is the same as our request channel that we're using from TCP. And then finally, just to be consistent with the TCP adapter, because the flow currently is expecting a byte array, I'm just going to set the requested payload type to a byte array, so that it's consistent with what we're doing with TCP. Return that gateway. So now we have another inbound channel adapter, and as you can, or in this case, gateway. So as you can see, again, it's just message-driven endpoints on the inbound side are relatively easy to define. We just basically wire up the bean. So we can run our app again. Again, no, I'm not deploying it on a server. It's just using Spring Boot's embedded web server. The application comes up. We can still do our telnet and get back echo for the telnet. Let's get out of telnet. But I can also do curl. So I'm going to curl. I'm going to do localhost 8080. I put it on the foo path, if you remember. I'm going to set a header, content type, text plain, and then let's just send foo. And as you can see on the left, we don't get a carriage return this time, but you can see there we got echo foo returned. So now we have a simple application. It's got two inbound endpoints that both invoke the same flow. Again, that's always been available. So what's new in Spring Integration 4? Well, there's a lot, and I'm not going to have time to cover it all here today. But first thing we're going to do is look at the alternative way of defining our message endpoints. Oops, need to do that. Just comment that out. I'll leave that in there. As I said, this project will be in the samples repo by the end of tomorrow, or earlier if possible. So what should we do? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add one thing we can do now with Spring Integration 4 is we can actually define a message endpoints annotations directly on the on bean definitions. So I'm going to actually create basically a transformer. Now, because transformer and the transformer annotation are both the same class name, we end up with a fully qualified transformer here. So I'm just going to say here, I'm going to call this bean convert to string. And I'm just going to return an object to string transformer. Now, since I think it's since 3.0, the object to string transformer can take a byte array and return it as a string. So as ever with these endpoints, we can define the input channel. I'm sorry, not search, it's request. And we're actually going to do a Twitter search now from this. So the output channel for this transformer is going to be to a Twitter search gateway. So I'll call it search channel. So now, as long as the object is of an appropriate type, so in the case of a transformer, it can be a transformer. In the case of a service activator, it can be any message handler. So you can just define the message handler within the bean definition, annotate it with the appropriate messaging annotation, and away we go. So let's create the search channel. Just return a new direct channel again. And now I'm going to create a Twitter outbound gateway. The Twitter outbound gateway is a new component in Spring Integration 4. Previously, we could only do when we do searching Twitter, we'd have an inbound channel adapter which does the same search over and over. With Spring Integration 4, the Twitter outbound gateway is basically we can do ad hoc searches. Now, because it's a message handler, all outbound endpoints are message handlers. We can invoke that as normal with a service activator. The input channel is going to be our search channel. And I'm actually going to, the gateway will return a list of tweet objects. So I actually want to convert them to JSON. So I'll set the output channel is, oh, no, sorry, it doesn't go there. I'll clear this up in a minute. So the Twitter search outbound gateway is the new class. I guess we need to make it public. Twitter gate. Now, I'm going to instantiate the gateway. Now, as you can see, it actually needs a Twitter template. Just to save a little bit of time here, I've already defined the bean for that, and we'll go down and take a look at that in a minute. The Twitter template is with the new Twitter API. The Twitter template has to be authenticated even for doing searches. Earlier versions of Twitter didn't require authentication. So now, what we have to do when we're defining beans in this way. The annotation really only pertains, so the annotation here really only pertains to the consumer part of a bean. All endpoints that are consumers really consist of two components, at least two components. There's a consumer endpoint, which is created by consumer endpoint factory bean, and then there's a message handler. Some things like the input channel, the polar, what else? The life cycle, like the auto start and things like that, belong to the consumers. So when we're defining a bean like this, we have to the input channel goes in the annotation, but the output channel actually goes on the message handler. And so I'm going to send this to JSON channel, which I'll define shortly, and we just return this gateway as our bean. So I'm just going to copy this search channel. I'm going to call it to JSON channel, and of course we know we just need another transformer to transform the results of the Twitter search to JSON. So I'm going to take this convert to string transformer, copy it. In this case, we don't need an output channel because this is going to be our final consumer. So the last thing we're going to do with this data is convert it to JSON, and then the result will be returned to the gateway. And so I just need an object to JSON transformer defined here. The one thing I didn't show you yet, I delete these empty lines, is the Twitter template, and oops, got to change the name of our JSON transformer. This is the Twitter template. As you can see, it needs to authenticate, and you go to dev.twitter.com to get these tokens and secret values. They're already on my class path in an application YAML file, which is picked up by Spring Boot. And when you look at the project, there'll be a dummy YAML file out there with that you can put your own credentials into. So what do we have now? We've used the new Spring Integration 4 technique of annotating beans and directly invoking message handlers. So in this case we have a transformer. We're going to use an object to string transformer. We're going to invoke the Twitter search outbound gateway, and we're going to convert the result of that to JSON, and away we go. So, with that said, let's fire this puppy up. Let's make sure I stop the previous one. Make sure I have no typos in here. Move my cursor here. So let's do the telnet thing again, and I'm just going to search on Spring integration. Remember, that's now going to go from byte array to string to a Twitter search, a bunch of tweets back in a list, convert them to JSON, and we should get back a big splash of JSON, which we do. So you can see lots of tweets about Spring integration, which is a good thing. And just to complete the circle, let's get out of telnet. And of course, we can do exactly the same thing with curl coming in via the HTTP adapter. And again, here's our JSON results. So, pretty cool. No XML. We have a fully working application that gives us this what previously it would have been quite a lot of work to do that with bean definitions. The next thing I want to address is the DSL, the Java DSL, which is, as I said, is a work in process. But the first iteration, the first milestone is out, the Spring Integration Java DSL. So let's take it for a spin. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this class and into the other package, and let's get rid of stuff that we don't need. I'm going to keep the connection factory for TCP. I'm going to keep the TCP gateway. I'm going to keep the HTTP gateway and the request channel. Everything else except, let's see, we don't need the transformer anymore. We don't need the search channel. We do need the Twitter gateway. We don't need the JSON channel. We don't need the JSON transformer. We do need the Twitter template. And I'm just going to delete this JSON channel from here, and in fact that can go as well now. So, using the DSL, let's see what the equivalent application would be with the DSL, and I think you'll see that it's a much more concise way of defining our integration flow. So, in fact, that's the name of the type that we create. I'm just going to call it flow. Let's import that. And we have a factory. We're going to say, okay, integration flows from a channel called request channel. Now remember, both those adapters are going to send their message to the request channel, or both those gateways. First thing I'm going to do, if you think what we did before was convert it to a string from a byte array. So we can just say transform, and then just as we did before, object to string transformer. We have transformed it. Now I'm going to do a little bit different. We didn't have this before. We can actually add a payload. Actually add a filter, and we're going to say payload starts with. And this is just a spell expression. I'm just saying that we're only going to accept Twitter searches for hashtags that start with the Spring keyword. So we've transformed it to a string. We've filtered it. Now we're going to invoke the handler, which is our Twitter gate. So that basically is now going to invoke the Twitter handler the Twitter search outbound gateway. And just to be, again, a little bit different than what we did before, is I'm actually going to use a spell expression to just pick off the first tweet that's returned. So to do that, we can just use simple. We know that we're going to get back a collection, so we can just use the collection accessor to get the first tweet that's returned. Oops. And then finally, let's actually convert that one tweet object to JSON transformer. And that's the end of the road. So the way the DSL works today is we then invoke get, and that then so we have the I'll import that. Oh, new. So this builds the flow. We can see the flow from a channel, transform it to a string, filter it, say only handle it when the payload starts with Spring, invoke the gateway, pick off the first tweet, and transform it to JSON, and then the reply or the response, the reply message from that object from that final consumer, which is again the object to JSON transformer, goes back to the gateway. So let's give that a spin. Stop the previous run. And now we're actually starting a different class. We're starting the application in the DSL package, which I need to save. Okay, so it's running. We can now go back to our command line and let me telnet. And again, I'll do Spring integration. And now you can see we only got back one tweet. Instead of getting all that XML, all that JSON, we're just getting back the first tweet that was returned. It looks like somebody likes Spring integration. Spring integration is awesome. Cool. And of course, just to I escape out of my telnet here. We can also curl it and get back the one. Okay. So that's just sort of just the first taste of the Spring integration DSL. Now I'd like to do a demo that enhances this some more. As you can see, the filter is pretty lame. It just says if the payload starts with Spring, then it passes the filter, and we drop it down to the Twitter gateway. Everything works just fine as expected. But if it's not with Spring, it just gets dropped on the floor. No response goes back to the gateway. We'd have to add a timeout to the gateway and do some kind of error handling or what have you to deal with the fact that we got back no that the request was invalid. So what I'm going to do is use an alternative. I'm going to use Java 8 lambdas to actually add a more sophisticated filter at this point. So I'm going to create a message selector using a lambda, and I can say p dot starts with, again we want it to say starts with Spring, and I'm actually going to configure the actual filter, and I want to set the discard channel to rejected. Okay, so now we've actually put some logic into this DSL flow to say, okay, I'm going to filter hashtags that start with Spring, and if somebody gives me one that doesn't start with Spring, we're going to send that to this discharge channel. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, save a little bit of time. I'm going to create my error flow or discard flow. So let's rename this. Just call it error flow. And this time we're going to say from rejected, and I'm just going to say transform. And this is going to be a spell expression, so I need some literals here. Error hashtag must start with spring got plus payload dot get. Oops. Let me make this bigger. Quote goes inside there. Dot get. So now we've built our error flow, and now what's the error? I have an error here. Oh, need a semicolon. So now we have our DSL flow, transforms to string, filters. If it doesn't pass the filter, we discard it. We call Twitter. We strip off the first tweet returned and convert it to JSON and return it. So let's restart our app. Okay, now I'm going to telnet again. If I say foo, I get error hashtag must start with spring. And of course, if I do spring integration, we get back a tweet that says spring integration is awesome. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good flavor of what we can do now with Spring Integration 4, together with the DSL that's in process, and we'll hopefully come to a conclusion. As I said, we're really looking for feedback on this DSL. It's challenging to come up with a suitable or usable flow like this, but we think we've done a pretty good job so far, or should I say Artem has done a pretty good job so far. He's the main contributor to this effort. The last thing I want to show in the time that we have left today is, this is all very well. This is a standalone app. We have inbound adapters, outbound gateways, blah-de-blah-de-blah. What about if we want to interact with the Spring Integration flow from a Java application? It's a very common usage pattern, and for those of you, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Spring Integration, the main component that we use to do that is the messaging gateway. We define our in XML, we define a gateway element, we give it a service interface, and we inject into our application an instance of that interface that the framework builds for us. The framework builds a gateway proxy factory bean that basically implements that interface for you. So now I'm going to show you how we do that in Spring Integration 4 without any XML. So let's start with just defining an interface. So I'm going to define an interface. Public interface, and let's be really inventive with the name. I'm just going to call it gateway, and we'll give it a single method, string send receive, and it takes a string as input. So we've defined our interface. This is going to be our interface into the messaging system from a Java application, without it knowing that it's invoking a messaging system. So Spring Integration 4 added a new annotation messaging gateway, and we have a new annotation at the class level, the integration component scan, which will basically look for interfaces on the class path that are annotated with messaging gateway. And of course, the messaging gateway annotation has all the attributes that we know and love from the XML version. So we can set our default request channel to the one that we've been using all day. And we can set headers, we can have replayed, we can set timeouts, and all that good stuff. So now let's sort of how do we use this from our application? And it's just the same as if it was defined with XML. The first thing I'm going to do is change our app to be able to read data from the console. Just using Java util scanner, and I'm just going to take system in as the input stream. I'll define we'll get the hashtag from the command line. Is scanner next line. STS complains if you don't close the scanner, so I'll do that. And now we're going to invoke our gateway to do this search. So in order to just demonstrate it, I'm just going to sys out, and I'm just going to say context get bean of type gateway. And with that bean, I'm going to call send receive, and I'm going to send the hashtag. So, of course, I'm doing get bean on the application context. That's just convenient because Spring Boot gives us an application content from the Spring application run method. So I'm doing a get bean on the gateway. Of course, this could easily be @auto wired into your application. Into a controller. If you're in an MVC environment, you want to invoke an integration gateway, then you just simply define the interface, which is the gateway into the messaging application, add the integration component scan so that it can be found, and then we can use that bean directly now from within the application. So just as a final test here, let's run it again. So we got the Spring Boot preamble. Our application's running, and of course now from the console, I can now invoke that gateway. And if we scroll back up, sure enough, we got the tweet from the console, and of course, it's still we still have the other endpoints out there. Just have to start it again because it just stops after doing one query. We still support our other give us some junk as the hashtag must start. So that's really all I had to show you today. It hopefully gives you a flavor of what we've been doing, and giving the ability to create integration applications without any XML, and then sort of like the next generation, which will be using the Java DSL. Of course, we already have the Groovy DSL and the Scala DSL, which haven't had much attention lately, but they're available too. But hopefully this gives you a flavor of what we've been working on, and as I said, any feedback you can provide for the DSL would be extremely useful for us. If you have any questions, I'm sure Peter will ask, and while we're talking about that, I'll just put these URLs back up.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, no problem. So Arash asks, does the container manage the TCP inbound gateway? Do I need any XML config for that?
Nope. Everything you saw there, it's all completely done in Java. If I go to the go back here, all we needed for the TCP inbound gateway was a connection factory, which in this case, we didn't set any additional options on it. Just listens on port 9876. By default, it's compatible with Telnet, so it's easy to demo that way. It just expects data to be terminated, carriage return, line feed. So there's no XML. There's zero XML in this application. As I say, it'll be up on the samples repo by sometime tomorrow. So you can play with it at your ease. So we have a connection factory, and we just have the TCP gateway defined as being definition.
Excellent. Thanks, Gary. Arash goes on to ask in a, I believe, unrelated question, as he says, the gateway interface was never actually implemented. So how does the bean know how to run the send-receive method?
Well, that's the magic of Spring integration. What happens behind the scenes, and this happens whether you use the old way we would do this in XML, you would actually have int gateway and then service interface equals foo dot gateway, and in either case, either when you're defining it in XML or you're defining it as a messaging gateway in this way, the framework builds the implementation for you. You just tell us what you want your method to look like. You can add additional methods. You might have a one-way gateway that just sends. You might have one that sends different types instead of sending a string. You might or sends and returns different object types. So each of these methods, the framework generates the code for you behind the method. To effectively, what happens is when I call send receive hashtag here, that invokes the framework, and the framework says, oh, okay, I've got a hashtag, I need to make a message out of it. Just like when the TCP inbound adapter, or the inbound gateway, gets a packet or gets an assembled packet from the TCP stream, it then wraps it in a message, adds some headers, makes the message that makes the data the payload. Works exactly the same way. The gateway, the framework, creates the implementation for you that effectively wraps your argument in a message and sends it to that request channel. When the reply comes back to the gateway, we strip off the headers and return the value as the result of that method call. So the whole point of this, and say we generally recommend coding with Spring integration applications to POJOs. It's best if your application doesn't know that it's utilizing a messaging system. There are times when you need to do that, like if you want to examine headers and stuff like that. But this is a very powerful abstraction. So your MVC controller, for example, can go off and do a Twitter search, and it doesn't know how that Twitter search is done. It just invokes this gateway, and then you can later on change that implementation to do different things. Maybe go to a rabbit queue or somewhere else to get the data. So that's the idea. It's an abstraction on top of the messaging system.
Nice, Gary. Thanks. Boy, do we have a lot of questions all of a sudden. This is good. So Artem, of course, is on the job, but great question from Taylor. Asks, where can we find a mapping of the XML namespaces to Java config and DSL equivalents?
Right. Currently, it's not. We don't really have good documentation for that. It's kind of like you have to hunt around. The the real canonical answer is look in the parsers, the XML parsers, right? It's pretty easy to see that when we parse the Twitter outbound gateway, exactly what we do. But yes, that's definitely something we need to look at is to how to, and we do want to beef up the documentation in this area to effectively provide you with a reference guide that will say how to configure everything using Java.
Sounds like a great blog post idea.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's pretty self-explanatory. I guess the biggest thing is to find the class name, right? And for the most part, it's pretty obvious. You look in the modules, Twitter search outbound gateway, right? I mean, Spring tends to have very verbose class names, so it should be pretty obvious looking at the module source tree. Oh, we've got the outbound package, and within that we've got a gateway and a channel adapter. So that's a good starting point. And then, as ever, the IDE's auto-completion will give you these attributes that are available on that. But yes, we'll definitely take that as a to do is to provide a better reference documentation on that.
There is no missing reference documentation, only blog post opportunities.
There you go.
Just kidding. Another question from one of my favorites. I see him on our webinars all the time. Please forgive me if I slaughter your name. It's Bassam or Bassem Zodi. Zodi. I see him frequently, actually, on our webinars. He always asks great questions. This is no exception. He says, how does Spring integration, will it work with the concept of microservice architecture?
Well, it really provides that. Many applications that are using Spring integration are using it for just that purpose. Just these tiny, either in memory or off service, off box microservices to build a bigger application from a bunch of smaller components. So absolutely, yes, it's a very good fit.
Great. Let's see. Jalesh asks, can we still see the integration graph from this Java-based configuration?
As always, the tooling is always a little behind. Not at this time, but if you go back to Spring 3, when Spring 3 came out, the tooling wasn't quite didn't keep up with the progression of the Java code. So no, as of today, it's not there. But I'm sure the tooling guys, both the STS, the Spring Tool Suite, and the JetBrains guys for IDEA are pretty up to speed on things like that. So it's definitely not there today, but hopefully we'll get there.
Leela had a very similar question. I think you just answered it. She was asking if you can get the integration graph using just the Java annotations. I think you answered that one as well. So right. Leela and what was the other gentleman's name? Leela and Zaidul. Oh boy, I might be really slaughtering that one. Sounds like you might want to open a Jira ticket for our Spring Tool Suite team. They are extremely responsive to that sort of stuff. So if that's something you want to see, I would highly recommend just going to the Spring Tool Suite and opening a Jira ticket, and I guarantee you that you'll at least get a response, if not a feature. They're always on the lookout for user requests. Let's see. Oh yeah, no, sorry. Jalesh that answered that question, that asked that question. Next question is from Zaidul Islam. He says, is the integration graph supported? Oh, okay, same question. Sorry, is the integration graph supported in Java config / Java DSL? So I think we've knocked off a couple questions with one answer there. Right. I guess he's looking for the ability to do Zairul is trying to just, I think, make sure of himself here when he says, so to change the business logic, do we need to actually update the code, for example, to add a new filter or, a new router, for example, or something like that? And yeah,
Right. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, one of the real powers of Spring integration, question came up, in terms of comparisons with other projects like Camel. One of the real benefits of Spring integration is the fact that the message channel is a first-class citizen, and so you can go in with XML. You can go in and change your configuration very easy. You can change a channel from being just an in-memory channel to a JMS back channel or a Rabbit back channel. But you've got that level of abstraction. Now, when we start going to this style of development where we're actually writing Java code to do the configuration, only as beans in one case, when they're beans, it's still quite easy to change channel types. But once you start using the DSL, then it tends to be, you tend to lose some of the loose coupling. So clearly this flow as defined here, it's pretty fixed. Yeah, you can go in and change the filter expression, and you can add other components, but clearly it's not as loosely coupled as when you're defining your beans as discrete elements and connecting them together with channels, which is what we do with XML and what we do with standalone bean definitions. So it's sort of like you pay your money, it makes your choice. It's kind of if you want a quick on ramp, then maybe you'd use the DSL. But then if you want to, or if you consider that your application is going to evolve over time, then you might want to stick with app bean definitions or even continue to use XML. It's what we're trying to do here is provide you with the choice and the tools that will fit best with what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yep, that makes sense. Bassem also asks, is there any plan to integrate Spring integration with Reactor?
Yes, the Spring XD project is kind of like an incubator for us in that space. We have some XD modules that are using Reactor. We haven't quite yet decided what stays in XD, what moves to Spring integration, but we anticipate that in the 4.1 time frame that we'll be picking up some of the Reactor stuff that's in Spring XD, things like Reactor-backed message channels, which is a sort of thin layer on top of the LMAX disruptor buffer, ring buffer for channel dispatching. There's a very high performant TCP Reactor module, which we'll probably be pulling into Spring integration proper. But XD is sort of the breeding ground for those components at this time. XD, if you're not aware, Spring XD is heavily dependent on Spring integration, and a number of components over the last 9 months that have made it into Spring integration proper has started in XD, and so as an XD requirement comes up, XD extreme data, right? I mean that's where we're driving some of the requirements for high performant flows, and so that's sort of the breeding ground for those kind of things.
And in case anyone's unfamiliar with Reactor as a concept, this is an embeddable library, not a full-stack runtime like Vertex or something like that for doing asynchronous, super high throughput, messages and datagrams and such. So great. Thank you for that, Gary. Let's see. Again, Daniel asks, can we still see the flow visually, like in Spring Tool Suite when you were doing the XML config? There was a visual view for the Spring integration context XML.
Right, that's the same question we just answered. The tooling is a little behind, so not at this time.
I wasn't sure if that was the graph or whether it was something else, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, great. So a lot of interest in that one. So it smells like a Jira ticket to me. Okay, yep, had another question about the flow diagram in STS. Let's see. Nilesh, if you're still on the line, you were asking if it's possible for Gary to share his desktop and show the application that we have just coded. If you could clarify what exactly you're referring to there a little bit more, that'd be great, and then maybe we could have Gary show that to you.
Yeah, I mean, I have the whole thing up here, but like I said in that slide, certainly by the end of the day tomorrow, probably before that, it will be in the integration samples under a new. We currently have like basic, intermediate, advanced, and applications. I'm going to add a new DSL package to the integration samples, and so this application in its finished state will be in that repository tomorrow, or maybe even later today, but probably tomorrow now.
One more question from Bassem. Is there any enhancement for the Spring Integration Executor Manager to make it easier? I'm not exactly following that question, to be honest, but Spring Integration maybe some sort of task manager or something is what he's hinting at here.
I'm not sure what the question is. I would say for anybody that has any questions that are kind of difficult to elucidate in a few words, then go ahead and use the Spring Integration tag on Stack Overflow or our forums to ask you questions in detail. Both Artem and I are very active on Spring on Stack Overflow and the forums. So as I said, any detailed questions that we can't cover here, then go ahead and ask the questions there.
Okay. We had another question on Reactor, which I think you answered from Zaidul Islam. Let's see. Yes. Gentleman's name is A. Poder. Anyway, is it just a preference to use code over XML? Do you prefer the code way or the XML way?
I think it's horses for courses. I mean, I don't have any aversion to XML. I know a lot of people do. So it's hard to say. I mean, the DSL I think is quite compelling to me. Being able to define a flow like this is obviously you could write that code a lot quicker and get your flow running a lot quicker than creating the XML equivalent of that. But as I said in a response to an earlier question, there's a little bit more flexibility with the XML in that you can use, you can still do it in Java too, but you can use profiles and change channel types and things like that in XML, or if you're using the @bean definitions, whereas it's less easy to configure a flow when you're using a DSL, or to reconfigure a flow. So it's horses for courses. It really depends on what your application needs are. I would say to get up and running quickly with Spring Integration, if you're completely new to it, then this DSL together with Spring Boot is quite compelling in my mind.
Excellent, Gary. Thanks. I think last question. Artem already answered this, but I think it's worth repeating for the rest of the audience. Is basically about migrating 3x Spring Integration to 4x. Could you say a few words about that? And he, by the way, Artem did link to the migration guide.
Okay.
But there was some back compat questions, and thought it might be a good opportunity just to make it clear that this does depend on Spring 4.
If we go to just go to the Spring Integration page on GitHub, we do have a wiki for the project, and all of our migration guides are here. So the 3 to 4, as I say, this is probably the biggest change for people, but only if you're actually importing the Spring Integration classes. For the most part, it's just the fact that these classes, message channel, message handler, etc., have moved from the Org Spring Framework integration package to Org Spring Framework messaging. Spring Integration 3 will work with Spring Integration 4, but in your IDE, you're going to see two message objects, two message channels. It's kind of difficult, you got to know which one you want to pick. But for the most part, it's as simple as just fixing up your imports. Some of them are different, like message handler, message processor moved from integration core to the messaging root.
That seems like a pretty straightforward refactor.
It's typically just changing the packages. The only class name I think that changed is the channel resolver. So if you're actually using channel resolver directly in your code, we now have this notion of a destination resolver for type message channel. But hopefully, the migration guide is quite complete in terms of it's going to tell you what you're going to need to change. I can tell you that I migrated XD from Spring Integration 3 to 4. We migrated all the samples from Spring Integration 3 to 4, and it's a little bit tedious if you've got a lot, but sed and grep are your friends. You can run sed and
yep.
he'll just fix them all up for you. It's not particularly onerous, but it's worth it in the long run, because now you're not going to have this confusing class path, because everything's there's only one message on the class path now.
Seems like a pretty straightforward search replace refactor, huh? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's great news. And then I think our last question is, what would you say to Apache Camel users or people who are, kind of always tracking, Spring Integration, Camel, which one should I use? What would you say about the 4.0 release, and how it might compare, for example, to...
I'm going to be biased, right?
Of course, I think people realize that this is the spring. This is a spring webinar, so they realize there's a little bias built in. Not to worry.
Yeah, as I say, I think a combination of the Spring Boot. Spring Boot. If you haven't used Spring Boot before, it'll blow you away. It's unbelievable. Like one thing I didn't have time to show here is this enable auto configuration. If we had Spring Integration AMQP on the class path, we'd have a Rabbit template that we can auto wire. We'd have the connection factory. We'd have a Rabbit admin. It's Spring Boot basically looks at the class path and is very opinionated. It says, okay, I'm going to give you a default JDBC data source. I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you that. And the speed of getting started is quite phenomenal with Spring Boot, and especially with these starter apps that'll basically build your POM for you and get you started in that respect. And as I say, there are Camel does have a number of more interfaces to external products. However, the numbers are somewhat skewed sometimes because we have a mail module, but that covers IMAP, SMTP, and POP3. That's all sort of rolled into one. We just call it our mail module, right? So it's not really comparing horses for courses. The other thing is that we feel that Spring Integration is very easy to extend. So with this service activator, which go to my previous one. So with this service activator annotation, you can write your own message handler right here. My foobar message handler that interfaces with some legacy system or what have you, and you just plug it right in there. You just write your class, plug it in, and it just becomes part of the integration framework. So I think we're very extensible without being onerous. on the user. You can if you want to do XML and you want to make it XML configurable, you can go and write a namespace handler and all that. But if you just want the functionality, you just write a message handler, wrap it in a service activator, and away you go. You can interface with any system that you want if there's not something that we have out of the box for you. In fact, this Twitter search outbound gateway came from just that use case. Somebody on Stack Overflow says, "Well, it would really be nice if I could use a different search, different search each time, rather than the inbound gateway, or the inbound channel adapter, which does the same search every time it's polled." And so we were able to say, well, yeah, but all this Twitter search outbound gateway does now, which didn't exist at the time, is invoke this Twitter template, and it calls Twitter template.search, or whatever the method is on the Twitter template. So Spring itself, the various projects within Spring, such as Spring Social Twitter, has all the plumbing for you. And even though we didn't have a Twitter search outbound gateway, it was really easy for that particular user to write a little Pojo class that invoked that Twitter gateway directly, and then just wrapped it up in a service activator. And then, but we saw some value in adding it to the framework, so we went ahead and did that. And that's really these things grow organically. It's not hard to add new capabilities. We just need people to ask for them, right? So feel free to create Jira issues and even better, contribute something. We love user contributions. So.
Absolutely, we accept user contributions on things like guides as well. If you haven't seen the guide at spring.io/guides, some great content there, and we do accept external submissions for those. So if you think there's there's something you documented, you think it would be useful for others, feel free. Great. Well, I think I said the word Jira ticket enough on this webinar, and Gary just said it again, so I won't repeat. I will, however, just say very quickly that we are recording this webinar. It will be posted within 2 weeks to spring.io/video, which is a short alias for our YouTube channel. If you want to get notified about the replay, just subscribe to the YouTube channel, or probably a better option would be to go to our blog at spring.io/blog. And if you subscribe to the Atom feed there, then you'll not only get notifications when the webinar gets posted, webinar replay gets posted, but you'll also get all the great blog content from our engineering group, as well as Spring One, 2GX replay videos, and lots and lots of other great content. So with that, just want to say we are going to be having another webinar on May 20th. Josh Long will be back with Michael Hunger from Neo4j, talking about Spring Data Neo4j 3.0 and the corresponding update on the Neo4j database, Neo4j 2.0. That is going to be on May 20th. So please do join us for that. And just to note and finish off here, you can get a hold of the Spring Integration 4.0 release if you go to the project page on spring.io. You can get the Maven and Gradle coordinates. If you need an HTTP download direct for some reason, we don't really have that easily enabled on the website because it's kind of an inferior experience. But if you really need them, you can get them from our Artifactory server, which is at repo.spring.io. Again, that's repo.spring.io. I'm just going to put that into the chat window here. And let's see. Wes, saw your comment. Yeah, you just need to do spring.io projects. Just go to spring.io and click through to projects. You should be able to find it there, or I can pull out the URL for you. So navigation there should definitely not be broken. I'm just going to check it.
I just put it up now, so you just go to spring.io.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay, I just got the URL.
Spring.io projects, and then
yep. I'm going to pop that into the chat window here. Let me just get that back to him 1 second. Sorry, all my windows resized here. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So that's the URL for you, Wes. And then, we will have the replay within 2 weeks. Often we publish it much quicker than that. Yeah, like I said before, for some reason you do need direct HTTP downloads. You can get them from repo.spring.io, and there's some details about our Artifactory repository there at GitHub. You can see the link I just posted in there to help you learn about the repository, what it is and isn't, and how to get direct HTTP downloads. Okay, so with that, we're quite a bit over time. Thank you, Gary, for sticking on the line for almost a half an hour after the end of the webinar and answering people's questions. Really appreciate it, and to you, Artem, as well. And congratulations on just an incredible release, really opening the door with all your Java config support for Spring Boot, and just an incredible transformation of the getting started experience with Spring integration. So congratulations, guys, and maybe just whatever you want to say to sign off, and then we'll let everyone get on with their day.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for coming, and hope you get a chance to try some of this stuff out. And as I said, we're definitely looking for feedback on the DSL. We are expecting to have that in at least in the 1.0 GA timeframe in the next couple of months, certainly before Spring 1. But the more feedback we can get, then the better that 1.0 GA will be. So appreciate any feedback you have on that. So thanks again for coming.
Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.